Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. It is super early. Okay, it is not super early. It's about 8 a.m. But today we're going to be making barbecue pulled pork sandwich from Tanya Holland's Brown Sugar Kitchen cookbook. And this has to cook for quite a while. Well, so there's a problem, we think, with this recipe. So we have some doubts. My husband makes pulled pork and smokes meat all the time. And for this recipe, she has you cook this huge chunk of pork, which she calls for a pork shoulder. I could only find a pork butt. They are similar from the same general area of the animal, but they're not exactly the same cut. I don't know all of the specifics, but both make really good pulled pork. So that should be fine. But she says to cook this on indirect heat in the grill. She does not give specific temperatures if you have a smoker like we do, or if you need to cook this in the oven, which you can do. You can do pulled pork in the oven just fine. She doesn't give any instructions for that, but there are other recipes out there. Feel free to use those for the pork part if you do not have a grill or a smoker or anything that you can do an easy indirect heat for. Anyway, so she says to cook this for 4 to 6 hours until it's 150 degrees. My husband, who smokes meat a lot, says that is the stall temperature, at which point it will still take hours to get to the usual temperature of at least like 195 to 200-ish degrees that you usually pull pork at. He reads a lot about this stuff, and I know that he usually cooks pulled pork to at least about 200 degrees. But this recipe says to cook it to 150 and then to pull it. So my plan here is to cook it until it gets to 150 degrees, and then we're gonna try and see if it works. If it doesn't work, we have options. So we'll let you know about those at that point. But for now, we have our pork butt. I have, it's not the full one. I have about a half. Mine has no bone, because I had to request it from the butcher, and he asked if I wanted the bone or not, and I said no bone, because more meat. Anyway, either one's fine. And I'm just going to put kosher salt and black pepper on it. I'm going to try to keep this hand clean so I can turn it with this hand. But I'm going to liberally salt this on all sides, and I should probably go ahead and pepper it. This hand is still pretty clean. This pepper thing is going to be a problem. I might just have to clean my pepper grinder. So I'm just going to coat all of the sides, and you'll see that there is a fat cap side on this, which is currently facing you. I'm going to cook it with that fat cap side up. She doesn't, I don't think she even, yeah, fat side up on the grill. She does say to cook it fat side up, so that's good, which is, you know, a sort of standard thing that you do with this cut of meat. The pork shoulder often has skin on it. And also, these things can be called different things wherever you live. So in the United States or abroad, you probably have the same cut, but it might be called something else. So what you're looking for is a cut of meat with a lot of connective tissue that will be a whole lot better when you cook it low and slow. So I've got quite a bit of salt on there. It's about 5 pounds of meat, 5.5 pounds of meat, so it needs quite a bit of salt. And I've got my pepper, and that is all we need for this. So as I said, if you're using a gas grill, she says to preheat it with the burners on high, but then use indirect heat. So either turn off one of your burners if you can, or turn the burners down to, she says you want medium heat on your grill. I'm not exactly sure what that means, what you're going for, but on the smoker, you usually go for 225 to 250 degrees when you're cooking a piece of meat like this. So we'll let you know what it looks like when we've cooked it for 4 to 6 hours, or how long it takes to get us to 150 degrees. We are hoping it does not take forever, which is something that often happens with this kind of cut of meat. It sometimes takes a long time to cook. So we'd like to eat it today. So we're gonna keep our fingers, not this finger, we'll keep my fingers crossed, and hope we'll see you sometime little afternoon, before 2, by 2, we'll see. It's about 8:15. We'll let you know. My pork is just about done according to her. I'm not sure about that, but it's time to make the sauce. I was a little confused because she talks in the beginning about how they serve pulled pork with a traditional tomato-based sauce in Brown Sugar Kitchen, but their B-side, her barbecue side of her restaurant, they have options for different kinds of sauces, but this is not a tomato-based sauce because there's no ketchup or tomatoes in it at all. So we are going to go ahead and turn our pan on, I think, medium heat. We're melting just some unsalted butter over medium heat right here. Butter is melted. I'm adding a lot of white onion. Now, most of the onion that I use is usually yellow onion, so I bought the large white onion just for this purpose. It will cook down a lot, but we're gonna cook this, and then also quite a bit of garlic minced here over the medium heat, just until, she says 5 minutes. I think it takes more like 10 for me. Just until the onion is tender and translucent. So we're gonna be doing that while I finish gathering all of the other ingredients that I need to make this sauce. So while we were making the sauce, our pork says it's done. It's at 150. We don't think it's going to pull, but we're supposed to let this rest for 15 minutes and then pull it apart. So we're gonna try. We're gonna try to follow the recipe and see if it works. So I'm gonna continue cooking my sauce and making the sauce while it rests, and then we'll show you whether we think we can pull this at its current temperature. My onions and garlic, my onions are starting to get a little translucent, but I'm gonna let them go probably 5 more minutes. Just a lot of onion in a small pan, so yeah, we're gonna let that go. My garlic is starting to kind of stick to the bottom, so I'm gonna call this good for now. It is gonna simmer for a while before we call it good, so they will have a chance to cook a little bit more. But now I'm gonna add all of my other ingredients. So first, we need some vinegar. This is apple cider vinegar, the same as we use for our Eastern North Carolina barbecue sauce. So I don't know if that's what this is supposed to be like. We'll see. And now we have some water here. We have some dry mustard. I'm using Coleman's because it's what I have. And then we have some mustard seeds. They're supposed to be yellow. I only have these sort of brown ones. I'm sure it'll be fine. And then we have some cayenne pepper powder, cayenne, turmeric, and garlic powder. Just sort of put them all in the same container. We have some red pepper flakes, quite a lot of those, which again makes me think of the Eastern North Carolina style barbecue sauce that we made. So there's that. Let's see. We need some Worcestershire sauce. Wait, let me do the salt and pepper first. Again, let me do my dry ingredients first. So we need some kosher salt. There we go. And then we need some black pepper. I'm just gonna there we go. Let's see. And that is all that I needed to measure there. So we need the juice of 1 lemon here, which I have already cut in half, and I'm just going to squeeze through a sieve so I don't put all of those seeds in my sauce. Honey, just a little bit of honey. So I'm pretty sure in our Eastern North Carolina barbecue sauce we put more sweetener in it than this would be. So, and Worcestershire sauce. So go ahead, get that open. We need a few of these. There we go. And let me verify that I have all of my ingredients in here before I say we're done with this part. Okay, that is it. So we're going to bring this to a boil, reduce the heat, and simmer until it is thick and flavorful, about 45 minutes. So we're gonna bring it to a boil. All right, that's at a boil, and we're gonna simmer this, and we're not gonna cover it because I think we want to reduce it and have it be really thick. So I'm just gonna try to keep this at a simmer, and that'll be good. Now is the moment of truth. We're gonna see if we think we can pull this pork. So now is the moment of truth to see if we think we can pull this pork at 150 degrees. It's been sitting for 15 minutes, and as expected, like I can pull that one little piece off, but can't really pull the rest. So what we're gonna do, I talked about the Texas crutch before. That is basically when your meat gets to the stall temperature, which is about 150 degrees. That's the temperature when all of that connective tissue starts to dissolve, and that's the temperature it needs to be to dissolve and to become sort of a liquid and go through it, which is what allows us to pull the pork. I'm gonna wrap it. That's the Texas crutch. And then we're gonna put it back on the smoker for probably another couple hours is my guess. And we're gonna put this back on the grill, and hopefully it won't take more than 2 hours, but we'll see. This will help it heat up faster though, so off to the grill we go. All right, we got a little impatient. We took it off the grill. We needed to use the smoker for something else. So we wrapped it up in foil and put it in the oven at like 350 for another, I don't know, hour and a half, 2 hours. But it got up to 195. I pulled it out. It's up over 200, and it is going to pull just fine. I could tell everything pulled off. So instead of using forks, we have these things called bear claws. So I'm going to try to pull it using these. And I've got a bowl over here that I can put any bits in that I don't want. Like the really fatty bits, but basically I'm just trying to make it like pulled pork, so we can put it on the sandwich. Now, the recipe calls for putting this back in with the sauce into a baking dish and putting it in the oven at 350 for about 30 minutes. Now, I'm not going to do that. My sauce is warm. I've had it sort of on low most of this time. My pork is obviously very warm, and the sauce is really spicy. I took a little taste of it, and it is very spicy such that I feel like my kids won't like it. So I'm not gonna put it on all of this pork. So I may have to get out, we have some gloves with fingers that I can use to pull out the bits that we don't want a little bit easier. The extra fatty bits or the bits that didn't get dissolved with the heat. So, but I'm just gonna pull this and then we're gonna make sandwiches. I'm gonna let people add the sauce as they prefer. And we are supposed to put this onto about 1/3 of a cup of this, I think. Anyway, you put this on a French roll or a hamburger bun, and then you top it with the spicy green slaw that I have made previously. And I will link here. And that is your pulled pork barbecue sandwich. And we'll show you what it looks like when it's done. On this episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, you watched me make the barbecue pulled pork sandwich from Tanya Holland's Brown Sugar Kitchen cookbook. And I had problems with this recipe. I knew going in that I was going to have problems with this recipe because this is not our first time making pulled pork. In fact, we do it relatively often. We did it like a month and a half ago, I think, the last time. It's one of those things where it makes a lot. So if you only have a small family, you don't really have to make it that often, but we make it when we have gatherings rather often. We have a smoker, we like to smoke meat. So we do that quite a bit. And when this recipe said to cook it to an internal temperature of 150 degrees and then to pull it, that sort of set off some bells in my head. It really feels like there's another step missing here. I looked online to see if there was an updated or a different type of recipe for this that she had done. Like sometimes a recipe will have corrections, and if you publish it to like if you make it on a TV show and they'll publish the recipe, sometimes there'll be changes there. I looked for that. Everything I found was either exactly the same as this, or she had one version of this recipe where she braised it in the sauce. She braised the pork in the barbecue sauce sort of before making the pulled pork. And it was always, except for the braising, it was the same. So we tried it, which is what I do here on this channel. I try to make the recipes as written, but it didn't work. So at 150 degrees, not all of the internal connective tissue has broken down, and it's sort of just starting to break down, and it takes hours and hours and hours after that to actually break down at a low cooking temperature. So you'll see that we tried to pull it with forks, and like one little part on the edge that had some connective tissue pulled off, but that was it. And that's not, everything else was going to be really tough and really hard to pull. So what we did was we crunched it, we wrapped it, and we smoked it for a little bit longer, and then at the same temperature, and it was still taking too long. So we wrapped it in foil and put it in the oven at like 350 degrees for another hour and a half or so until it got up to, I think in the end, we were at about 195 to 200 degrees. I pulled it out at about 195, left it wrapped, let it sit for a bit, and it still kept going up to about 201, I think is what I saw on my thermometer before I took it out. So that is what you need to plan on when you are cooking a pork shoulder roast. It's gonna take you hours and hours and hours. Now, the size that she has here is about half of a pork butt. I've cooked pork shoulders before, but I don't know sort of the size range they come in. Pork butt, pork shoulder, very similar, slightly different as far as the sizes they usually come in. A full pork butt is usually like 12 pounds. So I got about a half of one for the 5 to 7 pound range that this suggested. And that is going to take you more than 4 to 6 hours at a low indirect heat temperature, which is what you need for pulled pork to actually be pulled pork. So I had that problem with this recipe. And I think my husband, who is the smoker in the family, was just very displeased all around with the recipe and the results and everything. So there's that. The other problem that we have with this recipe is that we are smack dab in Eastern North Carolina barbecue sauce region. It's always sweet, a little bit spicy, but not too spicy, and apple cider vinegar based. That is the usual brown sugar and apple cider vinegar with some red pepper and other spices depending on what you like. That, like we have made previously with the whole hog barbecue that we made. That is what we are used to. That is what we like. And I did not realize, after having read the intro to this recipe, that this was not going to be the tomato-based sauce that she mentions there, until I got to making it and realized there's no ketchup, there's no tomatoes, there's nothing like that in this sauce. This turned out to be much more like a South Carolina sauce, which is a mustard-based sauce. Now, it doesn't use any prepared yellow mustard, which is standard in those sauces, but the main flavors in it are from onion, of course, but also the mustard powder, the dry mustard, and mustard seeds. So and of course the turmeric sort of makes it that yellow. So while you're not using prepared mustard, you're using a lot of the ingredients in prepared mustard. So there's that. We are not fans of South Carolina barbecue mustard-based barbecue sauce. If you are, great, you should make this recipe. Another caveat is that with the amount of red pepper flakes she calls for in this recipe, it was really spicy. It was, I mean, I could eat it, especially on the sandwich. It was great. It was fine because you have the bread and the coleslaw and the pork to sort of mellow it out, to spread that out. Also, I didn't cook it with the sauce like you're supposed to at the end. I just didn't have time. So I let everybody add the sauce themselves, especially considering I'd already tasted it and knew it was really spicy, and my kids would not touch it if I did that. So it's really spicy. If you don't like spice, I would back it down at least a third. If you like a little bit of spice, a third would probably be okay. If you don't like spice at all, you could still add about 1/3 of the recipe. So back it down 2/3. If you're looking at the recipe, it'll make more sense. So I think it calls for 1.5 teaspoons of red pepper flakes. I would back it down at least a 1/2 teaspoon, maybe a whole teaspoon, depending. A little bit of spice is good. It was just a little too much spice for me, and it's just not a flavor we like. So we already made the spicy green coleslaw, and you should be able to see that up here. I'll link it here. And we used that on here. I did, as I said in that recipe, I added some extra salt to it before we used it on our sandwiches, just because I tasted it and it really tasted bland. So altogether, the sandwich tasted good. It's just not it's not the barbecue that I would make if I were making my favorite. It's a good change of pace perhaps, but it's not our favorite. If it is your favorite, let me know in the comments down below. If you love mustard-based barbecue sauce, let me know. Or if you love just another type of barbecue sauce, let me know. I've tried a bunch of them, but I'm sure I haven't tried all of them. And I'd love to try your favorite if you let me know what that is. Link me a recipe. And if you enjoyed watching me make this, please give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and come back and watch me make something else next week.